First of all, I just want to thank you guys for coming, because as I always tell people, I have no clout at this school. I don't have students I can bribe with extra credit or like, please go. So I'm so thankful for y'all being here even, and especially for Brenberg and the other professors who announced in their classes. So thanks so much. In case you don't know me, because I'm kind of new, my name is Bethany Jenkins, and I run the Vocational and Career Development. And part of what we're trying to do at the school is really make this office and y'all's experience much less about like just getting a job and a career, and actually making it more integrated into your faith and who you are holistically as people. And so I'm so excited to have our first ever panel with partnership with the Trinity Forum Academy. And some of my new friends, or one of my old friends. And so before I introduce them and ask, or before they introduce themselves, I wanted to remind y'all, who's interested in getting a free Kindle with 65 books on it? Yeah, y'all, it's actually pretty good. If you tweet or Facebook on the event page, or email careerservices@tkc.edu, a short answer to this question: at this point in your journey, how do you envision your call to God's mission in the world, with the hashtag King's Careers? Then you'll enter a chance to win. And I'm going to pick the winner. And we already have like 3 really good answers, but they have to be here too. So you guys have a pretty good chance. If I were better at math, I would actually do the numbers right now, but I'm terrible at math. So my first question to the panel is just, can you guys just tell us who you are and what you do every day?
It's on? All right. My name is Patrick Brio, originally from Texas, by way of California for school, and a few stopovers in actually playing professional tennis for a couple years, and then back to Texas for a bit in private wealth management. My current job is in philanthropic advising. I work for the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, which is essentially helping high-capacity donors navigate the entire giving process. So from what are they interested in, what causes are they interested in, to doing due diligence on charities, and then all the way through to managing their grants for them as if we were the staff of a foundation.
Hi, everyone. My name's Sarah New. I grew up in Malaysia, California, and now I'm in New York. I graduated pretty recently, about 2012, from Columbia University. And I'm working currently as a freelance writer, but my most recent job was as a sort of ghostwriter, speechwriter for the CEO of my company, who focused on ethics, culture, and leadership consulting. It's a bit vague, but I'm happy to explain. So that's that.
Some of you guys know me already. My name's Greg. I'm an alum. Please silence your cell phones during this speech. I'm an alum of King's. I graduated in 2013. I'm an MCA major. And I stayed in the city for a year doing consulting, working with some startups, and doing consulting also with like lead generation for companies here in the city. And got called, I guess you could say, to the academy, and am loving it. I'm a current fellow. So these guys are alum. I'm a current fellow. And now I'm producing a thesis as a part of my fellowship, focusing on recruiting and how our understanding of community and relationships affects the way we do and practice recruiting. So.
That was loud. My name's James. I have my own microphone because I salivate a lot. Now it's my microphone because nobody else. I'm a trombonist and composer, and I am from Nebraska originally. And so I do performing and composing, and I also work at a music school in the East Village, managing a partnership initiative where we go into public and charter and other kinds of schools to supplement, give them whatever kind of arts education we can that's not already funded.
At King's, one of the things we're thinking about with vocation is how our work is a reflection actually of God's work. So we work as his hands and his feet to bear his image to the world. When you guys think about your different roles as philanthropic advising, music, writing, or even just studying as a student, which is kind of what they're doing now, how do you guys think of your role as an expression of God's character in the world?
So one of the big questions that I didn't grow up in the church, and so one of the reasons for attending the Trinity Forum Academy was just to get a broader sense of what are really kind of foundational facts, issues, and theology of this faith. And so one of the things that I was questioning early was I heard people talking about, are you supposed, we're supposed to be evangelists, we're supposed to be going out and sharing this this message, but we're also supposed to be doing excellent work. And so for me, there was a dichotomy between which one is it? Are we meant to be, in one sense, witness bearers, that we are supposed to be, whatever we're doing, it's always a platform from which to share? Or are we image bearers, where ultimately what God cares about is, in fact, the work that we do, to follow his call, to be excellent, and to sort of take part as a co-creator with him. And to me, with help of this experience of 9 months of really trying to ask that question, it is, in fact, both. And I really can't separate the two, because I think he calls us equally to both. And so how that plays out for me is, should I work for a Christian philanthropic advisor or a secular philanthropic advisor? And for me, it was clear based on my own strengths and calling. I felt like both of those things could be accomplished through a secular organization, and hopefully bringing some of that expertise into the kind of the faith-based world. But I sense that I'm uniquely placed in this role to be able to do those two things at a well-known secular organization.
So I guess I'm still kind of unpacking this at the academy, but coming from King's, I was talking to Bethany about this and a professor a while back, and they were asking, so why did you go to the academy? Like, do you feel, what was the reasoning in the first place? Because King's is this awesome institution, and I was like, King's taught me how to engage ideas and really wrestle with them, and what ideas I should be engaging with. The academy is helping me hone the way I want to respond to those ideas and those questions that are out there that are kind of driving what our classes are all based on here at King's and what we do at the academy. And one of those is understanding like the purpose and intent for why we work, and understanding, I guess, more of understanding more of why we're called to work and what's the benefit of working in general. So like, in Genesis, I think it's 2:15, it says the Lord did all this. He rested from his work, and everything that he did, it was pleasing and good for life. And so that's kind of like this idea of, are we supposed to be doing something excellent, or are we just supposed to be working because it's something we have to do? And it's kind of unique because I've found that work, we have this misconception that work is a result of the fall, and it's the bad thing that happened because of the fall. But God commanded Adam to cultivate the earth and to work it before the fall ever happened. And so kind of shifting the way I look at work and understanding why and what we work for, as opposed to thinking, it's just this bad thing, it's going to suck, or you're going to just have to do something where you make a lot of money and not really care about it. As opposed to, no, it does work. It is something that we're called to do, and it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
I'll add on something really quickly. I think when people think about work, they tend to think of it in terms of what do I do, but something I did most recently in my company, and I think the academy helped prepare me for, is to think about how we do what we do. So the ways in which we lead, the ways in which we collaborate with people, the ways in which we promote trust or distrust. And that, I think, any experience in working well can tell you that a lot of office politics and sort of insider fighting can really get in the way of the mission. No matter how great the mission is, if people dynamics aren't right, it's going to be pretty corrupt. And so, but that's not a framework I think that many people have, if that makes sense. Like, how do I think about that Christianly beyond be nice and don't steal office supplies? For me, I think the academy is really critical in developing that sort of almost characterological understanding of who I want to be as a person and what kind of corporate character or corporate culture do I want to help promote and be a part of? And that's mostly what I did in my work through writing, trying to create paradigms for people to understand how to move from a sort of amoral mindset about business, business is just profits, to sort of a moral, values-based understanding of business in what you do, but also how you do what you do.
Yeah, I would just kind of echo that. In the arts, we kind of get a pass on the big view, by which I mean the question, should I be a doctor or a dancer? If you choose to sort of create stuff, there's a very easy way to talk about Genesis and creation and image bearing in that way. And so that question is pretty quickly and easily answered. But then the small view becomes tricky. And it's like, again, what you were saying, the how. How do I, go to this salsa gig as a Christian? Is that any different than going to this salsa gig as a normal person?
Because Christians aren't normal people.
Definitely
I
not.
think that was the point of his comment right there. When I talk about work, and I think that what they've highlighted really is there's 3 ways to actually think about how you're working. One, and this is how I'm actually working on a Faith and Work Bible with the Center for Faith and Work Executive Director David Kim. And we're dividing every story into one of 3 aspects of your heart. And one is heart, motivations, why you're working, what are you looking for personally. The other is relational, so it's community. How are you relating to your colleagues, your clients, the people you interact with daily? And then the third way is world. So it's how are you engaging in the world? And so how are you thinking about the content of the work you're doing, whether it's music, business, how are you working for that industry? Is the contract you're drafting a just contract? So that would be very different than my personal motivations. Am I struggling with idolizing money? Those types of motivations, and then relationships are obviously colleagues. In terms of, I just wanted to comment a little bit because a lot of y'all are business majors in finance. There's a fantastic, really short book called Business for the Glory of God. It's really short. You've maybe read it, Brenberg. It's by Wayne Grudem. I have a copy in my office that I loaned out to Skylar, who just returned it yesterday. If any of you guys want to just borrow it, you could read it in 30 minutes. But I'll just give you a really quick reason. I did an excerpt on the Gospel Coalition. I'm just going to read you one sentence. And it just says, money enables all mankind to be productive and enjoy the fruits of that productivity thousands of times more extensively than we could if no human being had money and we just had to barter with each other. Like, nobody really wants to barter really with what I can offer, which is just basically conversation. And although you guys would, y'all are students, you might want to barter, but nobody else in the real world. And so the great thing about this little short primer is really, in terms of bearing God's image to the world, it's a really great way to think about, like, business is good inherently. And then it's been corrupted. So by our sin and the fall. And so actually I want to turn to that a little bit and turn from like the creation and the goodness of the work we do as image bearers, and then think about and ask you guys how a lot of times students or any of us, we get excited because there's this new job we're going to have. And then pretty quickly we get disillusioned by the brokenness in the industry, or even the institution, or our bosses, or our colleagues, and then even in our own hearts that we struggle with things. In y'all's work, how have you, what unique vantage point do you have to see the brokenness in the world, whether it's in your heart, in your relationships, or in that world industry aspect?
For me, there's what's inherent to my industry, and there's what's inherent to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've been fortunate that those are 2 different things. I think people that really struggle are the people whose weaknesses are the same as those in their industry. So if they are in a field that tends to really be materialistic, really idolizes money, and they also personally do that. For me, that's a little bit me. Like, I like money and making money and spending it. But I'm in the arts, so I'll never have any of it.
Yeah.
So in my field, it's been more ethical stuff. So I went from the academy where we were talking about infant baptism and the way of Christ in the world of today. And then my first job in New York, my boss is really into blow and just all these situations. I was held up. A lot of situations came up very quickly that were like, okay, this is very different. And there's, yeah. So the world has its things, and I have my things, and I guess I've been blessed that they're 2 different. issues.
Is fame, like making a name for yourself, is that something that
Not if
your
you play the
industry?
trombone.
Yeah. That's true. I can't name one famous trombonist. I'm really trying right now. Yeah, that's true. You're the most famous one I know.
So for me, part of the academy was taking the gospel and mapping it onto your area of interest. And so, what is the message of your industry, or whatever you're going to be doing after the academy? And for me, philanthropy, the idea is if we give enough money to it and pick the right organizations, we will heal the world. We will save the world. And just when you actually say it like that, it sounds silly, but that really is the motivation, that we really do have power to make a difference. And then you see the limitations of that. When you compare the government's budget from Bill Gates' budget, and it's puny. The government has the bulk of the money. So when individual philanthropists can't do a lot. That was one thing that I saw, just inconsistency. But another thing was the motivations. Although they look completely altruistic, when you get down to it, it gets really ugly. Sort of it can be for your own fame. It can be for your, just to carry a legacy. It really does turn inwardly a lot. Certainly there are plenty of examples of the opposite, but the effects of our own pride and greed filter into all aspects of society, including what you would think is the everyone just doing good for their neighbor.
The way I like to think about it is you either operate from the center of power or from the margins. But there are trade-offs to both. So if you're working from the margins, let's say you're an activist, advocate, lobbying, you're not, best buds with Walmart. You have a lot of freedom. Sorry, no harm in Walmart. You have a lot of freedom to say what you want, make a big noise, that sort of thing. But you have to shout really loud to get heard. Does that make sense? Like you aren't, you have to fight to get a seat at the table. If you're at the center of power, you're there with all kinds of big corporations and political bodies. But because you're so intermingled, you have limited freedom as to what you can really say and how much truth you can speak. And so that was, I think, what I discovered as a speechwriter, right? My company works with the NFL, it works with huge corporations. And, it's a constant, balance of when do we push, when do we not push, when do we subtly imply what we need to say. Because it's a trade-off. You get to talk to the NFL, but it also means that you can't say certain things. And so that, I think, was a unique purview is how to make progress in brokenness, if that makes sense. And I think also personally, as a writer who's writing for someone else, you get really caught up sometimes in, if you're not careful, your voice gets lost in the process, if that makes sense, because you're so caught up in the sort of idols around you of power and money and fame. And the boss I had at that time, is somewhat C-list famous. And if you don't have a strong sense of self, you get kind of really caught up in the current, and it manifests in the voice in which you bring to your writing. You're always thinking of what does this person want to say instead of what can I with integrity say and make it fit what the person tries to say as well. So.
Those are some great examples. When we think about the image-bearing aspect and then we discover the brokenness of it, and then we think about calling and how theologian Friedrich Buechner says that we discover our calling when we see our great passions meet the world's greatest need. And so when you see that need, a lot of times it's out of brokenness, maybe your own personal experience. I have a friend who is a portrait painter who does that because she never felt seen when she was growing up. So that's where a lot of times we think of calling and giftedness, but sometimes it actually comes from brokenness. Last week I was in Phoenix talking to some people from who were looking at Kings, and one of the students told me that she worked in poverty. She helps families who are struggling with poverty issues. And as I asked her own life story, it turns out she was one of those families at one point and saw brokenness in the system and wanted to be a part of that redemption. And so as you guys think about your calling and how you're contributing and trying to renew as in God's way, as He does the renewal of all things, can you guys talk a little bit about how your work is a reflection of that love and also how you felt called to step into that space in a way?
Sure. So this program is quite built around this aspect of calling. One of the formative books that we read is Os Guinness's The Call. And the one of the questions for me was, what is success? So if I go out and do one particular line of work, how do I measure that? And you get asked that in interviews all the time. What's your definition of success? And for so many years, playing tennis in college, it was whatever my coach thinks of me. My dad was really close to me. He was my coach growing up, so whatever he thinks of me. It's my ranking. It's my GPA. But then as I studied actually about money, it was my main thesis, given how much you earn, how much should you spend, save, and give? And I have the percentages if you guys need them. Not true. But the Judeo-Christian worldview says there's an element of stewardship, right? That this is ultimately not ours, but we are a steward of these things. And that helped me a lot in my own calling, because I saw people that were smarter than me, that played tennis better than me, that were whatever, better looking than me, better whatever. But in the academy, as I was interfacing with other people, very talented people, I saw myself where I uniquely fit in, where I could add value. And this aspect of being okay with not being the best in every area, but owning who you are, what God has made you for. So the element, if your giftedness, if your sphere of influence is being a janitor, then you mop to the glory of God, right? Because that is what you have. That's what you have to give. And so for me, it's okay that I'm not going to McKinsey, that I didn't get that interview, right? But the way the Lord has uniquely shaped me has sort of allowed me to settle in and add value right where I can based on what He's gifted me with and the resources that I do have.
So something, it kind of, I guess, goes with the calling and work piece in a way. For me, I came to King's from another school because I just didn't feel satisfied with the school I was at. Didn't really feel like I was flourishing, and I just didn't know why I was there, kind of thing. And I came to King's because I have always felt this, I guess, calling to the phrase of society and culture. I feel more uncomfortable in the comfortable cul-de-sac Christian community than I do when I'm right in the hustle and bustle of it. And I think part of that is because we're called to be a light in the dark, and if you're a light in the light, it doesn't really do much. And I have, for my whole life, always wanted to do a lot and have some kind of thumbprint in the world. And I think that is, in a way, a reflection of this idea of being an image bearer. God is a creator, and I don't want to use the word like co-creator or sub-creator. Maybe we're just makers. That gives us a little bit of a lesser title than God, but in a way we reflect God's His ability to create and His desire to create. And so by doing that, my desire is to make redemptive whatever whatever it is. And I've seen that kind of, as you were saying, with like, if you're going to be a janitor, whatever it is, you carry that image. So you are a maker, and you're you bring joy, you bring peace, and you bring a life that isn't experienced outside of the Christian community. And so wherever you are, like that's a part of your unique call in general, or the call that all of us have is to bring that and to make in our environment whatever that light is, or that piece of creation is. And so for me, like, one of the things I've really enjoyed is getting to work with artists and creatives and entrepreneurs to kind of wrestle with how can we respond to the world and with the world in producing redemptive and positive and truth filled culture, art, music, startups, technology, and whatnot. And that's one way I've looked at it. I don't know. And to understand, like, I came to New York, and one of the things that I've seen now being in this program is I've lost sight of why I really came to New York, to be in the phrase of society and culture. And it took leaving and going to the academy and being in a place where I could reflect and have the time and space and fellowship and people pouring into me to realize the why I was there and what I had originally set out to do. And so it's kind of helped shape that for me, I think, and to really define the whole purpose in going here in the first place.
For me, work has been redemptive. I'll use the term sanctifying in two ways. It's brought me out of my comfort zone. It's made me encounter people that I wouldn't have otherwise. It's made me confront my privilege, like a white, tall guy of privilege from Omaha. Like, had I followed my natural, had I used the networks that were available to me at home and stuck with what was comfortable and what I wouldn't have ended up in New York. I wouldn't be doing music. I wouldn't. And every time I play a new gig with a different style of, say, world music, and I meet a new community of people in New York, I'm reminded how small my own experience is, and that's been huge for me. The other sanctifying thing about it is kind of what we were joking about earlier, which is that the trombone specifically is a difficult instrument to play, and it's hard to look cool while you do it. So if you care about your own image and you devote your life to playing this thing, it's sort of forces you to ask yourself every day, like, do I really want to do this again? And if the answer is yes, then you have to ask why. So I'm at home with that now, and it's been really fun, and it forces me to take myself lightly, and I'm thankful for that. So that's what it's done for me. What it gives to other people, like how my work is redemptive.
Before you even say this, I was actually going to go off. So we exchanged questions before, and I was going to go off the path and ask them a question and prepare y'all. And it was because no one else has said this. So vocation actually is not just about our own selves and our own passions and what we love. And it's kind of a little bit of the ethos of this age that the highest quality in a secular age is to be true to yourself. And where the only limitation to that is a limitation of choices. And that's the biggest threat to this age. But actually, vocation, in order for it to be a true vocation, and this is in Tim Keller's book, Every Good Endeavor, there has to be a horizontal calling in the relationship with a caller for a calling to happen. It's like implied. But also, it's an assignment to serve others. So vocation itself, you can work for yourself, you can find your own passion, but the distinctive characteristic for Christians engaging in work is it's not about us, but it's about you guys. I mean, it's about other people. So example, for me or for Brenberg, we're teaching. It's not to make it, even though Brenberg gets to be on Fox Business yesterday morning or the morning before, and he gets all famous. He's doing, I would argue he's doing what he's doing because he actually invests in you guys. It's really a love for the investing in who you are. That's why I came to King's. I love getting to know you guys and helping you. And that's what Andy Crouch talks about with disseminating power. People who are powerful give away their power because power is not a zero-sum game. You actually get to serve other people with it if it's being used Christianly. So now answer this latter part because that's where I was going to go.
Music, we get feedback really quickly. People clap, it's a good sign, and people tell you things.
Or they don't clap.
I think maybe other careers, you look to one or two people for feedback and you're like, well, am I serving people in this? So we get pretty one-to-one. We know if we're being at least uplifting, if not redemptive, to someone when we perform. Thinking about this consistently is what's kind of led me into that other part of my work, which is the, teaching kids in public schools and offering them, helping to offer them music classes they might not otherwise have. Hopefully redemptive to them. I know it's redemptive to me, and then everybody else will let me know either way.
Yeah. It's true. And music itself, the very first thing Andreas says to me, we need to put music on in this room. It's kind of boring. So music itself has just an emotional component that I think draws us out of our heads sometimes if we can be too thinking and into our hearts as well. I'm going to ask you guys the same thing because I know it's there. It just wasn't brought out in the question in terms of serving others with what you're doing, in terms of calling. Patrick?
Yeah, so part of my role is, the thing that excites me about what I do is that I get to have an influence on individuals so these influential people who have a lot of money to give away. But this sort of reciprocal effect of that is that if the donor is asking the right questions to the charities they're giving to, then you see this multiplied effect of a more efficient and effective social sector. So I'm minded very much around efficiency, and so how can I not only, maximize the efficiency of some process, but also of my value add to the world. And so I'm affecting these people of influence, and then beyond that, the broader social sector. So I do have this mindset of where does my talents, my resources match the needs of the world? And I see a big gap in the way that the nonprofit space handles its approach to what it does in a less efficient manner than it could. And so, again, in that calling assessment that we do, it's not only your individual resources and giftings and relationships, but it's where do those things uniquely match a need in the world. And so we spend half our time introspective and half our time talking about cultural events and things outside of us that need attention, whether it's very specifically, a whole in sort of the way a Christian approaches things, or just the way the world works.
So I'm a bit less calculative than Patrick, but partly because I grew up Pentecostal. But so I'll answer the question in slightly different ways. I think, so right now I feel like I'm called to be an older sister to my youngest sister who is in her senior year of high school and is applying to colleges. So I feel like when I think about how to spend my day, where do I invest time and place, to me I see that like my family responsibility is part of that, right? I also see part of...
She could go to King's. I'm just saying.
Okay. She did apply already, but thanks. Yeah, I mean, she's a funny girl. But I think part of calling also is one of the convictions I had coming out of the academy was that I was overly oriented towards what I could achieve. I needed to make room for God to do something, if that makes sense, instead of God just helping me achieve something. So one of my fellows was doing a thesis on the Sabbath, and I think he's a bit of a workaholic, and I am too in some ways. So I've tried to commit to 24 hours, a week where I don't make a ton of plans or agendas and say, like, God, like, you work. And oftentimes it means I am serving, like, whoever I'm there in the present, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not thinking about what I do next or, like, what am I missing out on if I'm doing this activity. So to be fully present with whoever I am, I think is a great service to that person. I could also turn off my phone, so I literally can't do anything. And it's been a struggle to kind of keep that discipline. That's something that when I think of calling in service, and I can talk about my work as well, but,
Well, we can, so I actually want to leave a bit of time at the end, just because if you guys like any of kind of what they're doing, I'm sure they would stay around to talk to you guys about stuff. But I'm going to ask, first of all, I want to say the Kindle deal is like closing. So if you want to do something real quick, you're about to have no more chances. Do any of you guys have any questions for them that I didn't ask that you want to ask in front of everybody? Yeah.
How does it develop that going into your faith in the workplace? And personal habits, like something that you feel like helps you with integrating faith?
It's a great question. Joy.
Getting there early helps because, at least for me, I'm an introvert, but like if you, let's say you pray at home and then you go to work, you're in a different space, you're in a different mindset. If you can get to your actual desk before there's a lot of people bugging you and making you think 100 different things, so you can bring yourself into that space before you're assaulted, that's a big help. This is going to be edited, right?
I really like that question because you see all these, people that go up and talk and they're doing everything well, and you're like, wow, you're amazing, but how do you actually do all those things? How are you a good spouse and a good parent and leading this company and going fishing on the weekends and everything? So I really appreciate that. What do you do? When do you wake up, and what do you do when? I resonate with that question. And I've asked that question a number of times, and usually the answer is I don't sleep a lot, which is unfortunate. because that's, it's not only a kind of helpful advice or like, hey, you maybe should think about resting, but it's actually commandment. I mean, it's like, this is serious, to the point in the Old Testament, people died because of it, because they didn't observe the Sabbath. And so at the academy, that was one thing that was really important to me. I'd never done it before, this taking one day a month for silence, for silence and solitude. So after our morning devotional time, we would go off in our own space. We couldn't say a word, and we couldn't be in the presence of other people. And so until the evening devotional. And that was really weird, but really neat to start this element of engaging and withdrawing and these rhythms. And so while I don't really do that extent, like that specific time now, this weekend I'm going back to New Haven. I was just at business school at Yale, and a mentor couple is there, and they've got this nice little home, and where they've got a lot of books and fire. And I'm going to spend the weekend essentially just laying low and not doing a whole lot, and trying to think about, what does this next season of life mean for me? What am I trying to accomplish here? Because there's so many options. So being reflective and having those different periods on a daily basis of whether it's time of prayer in the Word, but also on a sort of a monthly basis, trying to take some time away.
So at the Academy, we have daily matins and evensong. We read from the Book of Common Prayer. We sing hymns for half an hour at 8 o'clock and half an hour at 5 o'clock, and then we have a common meal together where we cook for each other. You rotate cooking schedules. And then so you have these periods of like communal engagement and also solitude. So for me, I think so part of the liturgy is you read a psalm a day. And I think it was the first time I really dove into psalms as prayers. So when I was going through a particularly hard patch at work, I had to remind myself like what mattered and who was king of the universe, because I was feeling like a certain amount of oppression. I would take time off and go into a room and lock the door and read the Lord's Prayer in a psalm, and maybe even turn off the lights, because I needed to kind of reorient my even like visual surrounding, to be like, okay, this is what matters. God is king, and I go back out. But I wouldn't have thought of doing that if I wasn't equipped with an understanding that you are shaped by what you do repeatedly and not just what you think or what you experience. And so I think that mindset the Academy really encourages and cultivates. And so I've taken that with me wherever I go.
And I will say one last thing too, Joy, is I think that's such a good question, because you guys are all in this season. First of all, you never get out of this season. I just want y'all to know you never get out of the season where you stop wondering, what is my calling? Everyone wonders it, whether you're 50, 40. I mean, you will always ask it with different circumstances. So just get used to that and start thinking about how you can build practices that help you, that will carry with you. But I will say one thing that you're pointing out that I've been in a lot of conversations with people, my friends at Center for Faith and Work, is that so much of what we think about as calling, work, calling, vocation is so related to that just daily practices of hearing God's voice. When I was 12, I asked my mom, she said something crazy, like, oh, God said this, and it was actually pretty crazy. And I said to her, how do you know it was God and not Satan, Mom? And she's like, because I know his voice. Just like if you called me, you wouldn't have to say it's Bethany. And it's always stuck with me, because how do you learn somebody's voice except you have conversations with them regularly? And so when students come to me and they say, oh, I really feel like this is what my gut's telling me I want to do, I'm like, well, do you have a good gut? I don't know if you have a good gut. And how do you create that good gut? It's by really just being in community. It's the daily, boring, non-sexy practices of community, scripture, prayer. It's really not like, so you do it regularly, and then all of a sudden when an opportunity comes, you have eyes to see it. And that's like what you want to get to the point where you are always, right? Of course, in New York, we can't do like the even songs and the 5 o'clock for 30 minutes and 8:30. Did you have a question too? Yeah.
Really funny, because I was very recently. You think philanthropy, everyone's doing awesome things and helping people pick flowers and like whatever, like this is great. But what is the definition of social good, right? And what if your personal convictions are opposite of what your client's is? And you can think of a number of examples probably in your head right now after I said that. So that happened to me. And I was asked to represent a client at a certain event that I didn't personally align with. And so the issue there for me was or at least the theoretical practice that I'm thinking about is certainly what are the baseline, the guidance in Scripture for this thing, whatever it is. But then there's some freedom after that. If you think about drinking, for example, there's no sort of mandate against it, and we could, go to a bar, and for one person, having a drink would be just fine. For another person, it probably wouldn't be a good idea because they've struggled with alcoholism in their past.
Or they're under 21.
True story.
I just want to be clear about that.
But the question is, what is the wise thing to do, and how have you been uniquely placed in that space? So for me, I actually decided after some prayer and counsel to go to this event. I wasn't going to support in any way of giving my own clapping or giving my own attention, but I wanted to do an excellent job at what I was doing, and I saw an opportunity there to actually bring those two worlds, the one that I was sort of personally associating with, and the world of what I was representing, to ask a question that might align those two worlds together. So there are some things that you can go to theoretically, but I think it really is in the moment, having really good counsel, hearing, cultivating in the not those difficult times, cultivating knowing the Lord's voice, and making a decision based on, again, on your calling and the specific circumstances that you're faced with.
I've had this happen a lot in New York, and I mean this sort of situation, and I'm brought back to Peter Fever, who was one of our speakers. He's a poli-sci professor from Duke, and his thing to us was always, you always have two choices. You can either take a stand now, or you can wait until you're in a position of more power, and then you can change the system. So I can either, take a stand now and not, decide not to do this scene or not play this gig, or I can wait until I'm calling the shots and I can make sure it's a just and better place. And I won't get there unless I do this thing now. For me, I live in a less high stakes world probably than most. Nobody's gonna die if I don't play my trombone tonight, but most of the time I end up saying no early, before the stakes are high, and letting people know where I stand pretty quickly, so that then the question doesn't come up again. If I was asked to sort of fudge on program notes for a high-profile concert one time, and I just told them very quickly and clearly no, and I was never asked to do anything like that again. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents. That's not saying that'll always work, but.
And it gets even more complicated sometimes because the questions aren't so clear. So one of my friends, he's actually much older. His kids are graduated college, but I'm friends with him and his wife. He used to run one of the divisions at one of the big banks. It was Bear Stearns, no longer exists. And he had hundreds of employees underneath him, and he could never really give the Sabbath off to his employees. And I thought, well, gosh, when you get to the point where you can, should we do that? And he said, Bethany, it's really not that simple, because he was also known around all of the banks, and people tried to drag him away from Bear many times, because he was known to keep he would never really do layoffs. And so what happened, and the reason why that happened was because during good market times, they were really busy and they couldn't do the Sabbath. But during bad market times, he didn't fire anybody. So here was this conflict between being like, do I ask people to work on the Sabbath because of my personal convictions of what work and rest is, or do I lay off people so that they don't have jobs just so we can then have the Sabbath? Do you see that tension? That's a hard question to ask. I don't know the answer. He did it one way, but this is where the wisdom, Daniel's a great example in the Old Testament. Esther, y'all, if I were to talk about what her real role was, not queen, it was pretty ethically questionable, actually. And yet God used her in unique ways. I'm not advocating, by the way, to be in a harem, women, but I'm going to ask one more question. It's like lightning bolt. And when I do that, I'm going to determine who the winner of the Kindle is. So if you literally have a last minute thing you can answer. And also they came here, and in case y'all didn't notice how many times they said TFA or Trinity Forum Academy, with the Trinity Forum Academy. And they just thought if you guys are interested, you can sign up, put your name, email address. I'm going to pass this around if you're interested in just finding out more. And then also they're just going to do lightning round, like one reason why they think you guys might find TFA interesting. So go.
Let me just really briefly tell you very basics of what it is, because that might be helpful.
This is your answer though.
Sure, that's fine. Fair enough. So it's a full-time residential academic fellowship that has 6 men and 6 women, and you live in the same house together. It's out on the eastern shore of Maryland. It is modeled after L'Abri, if you're familiar with that, sort of a holistic engagement of working and sort of your whole person able to sort of be engaged. So there's three real main core things: know yourself, know Christ, and know the world. And sort of at the confluence of those 3 things is the discovery of your calling. And so we work in a lodge, sort of to focus on servant leadership. We are sitting under a 5-star chef. You're sort of supporting her. You're also waiting tables, and you're doing housekeeping. The other element is you're in the classroom twice a day for an hour and a half, and you're studying from a whole range of people, but it can be history of ideas, it can be a practitioner, maybe a doctor who has sort of formed a theology of medicine. And then with that curriculum, you actually do a thesis project where a few of us have mentioned that you get to pick your own specific area of interest and pursue it. So it ranges from topics, but you have that space to really develop one idea pretty deeply. And then there's a big aspect of community. So we have, obviously living in the same house, 3 people per room, it gets pretty close and you get to know people. And so if I will add my one thing is that this was the first time where I felt like I was able to be fully myself in one place. I could be the goofy guy sitting in the living room of the house. I could be the very analytical and structured, maybe even a little kind of questioning, was that really true in the classroom? I could be the athlete, and all those things come together, and I felt known to where at the end of the program where we had our discernment groups where people are saying, here's some feedback for you, here's where you thrive, here's where you don't. I felt really known, and it was really valuable to get that kind of feedback.
If I were to sort of place bets, right? So let me step back. I think the church at large is engaged in this larger question: is how do we live in a secular, pluralistic society where we feel a little bit attacked, a little bit unsettled by various issues? That was sort of vague, but I hope you get my drift. And if I would place bets as to what leadership development training program of the next generation will win out, I might actually pick the Academy. There are a lot of interesting vocational fellowships. Redeemer has one. Lots of people have interesting things. The reason why I would pick the Academy is it, more than any other program, it's a holistic, integrative program that teaches you that helps you figure out not just what you want to do, but who you want to be, what kind of voice you want to have, what kind of relationships you want to have in your life. I think in the long run, that's what will serve the church the best, if that makes sense. It's not if they figure out the right ideas or the right jobs or the right activities they push out, but how do they live a different witness, individually and collectively and corporately. So it's not for everyone. If you're looking for, how do I know what I want to do, I need to figure out how my faith works with that, then maybe this is too much of your time. But if you want to dive a little bit deeper and figure out how to live differently, and you just need some time to do it because New York's super busy and chaotic and overly stimulated as an introvert, then I think it actually might be a good fit.
So there's a book called Living Speech by a guy named James Boyd White, and we just had a discussion about this book in class. And he's got this concept of there's living speech. The whole book is about it, but he breaks it down into there's different categories of people. There's people that know what they want to say, but don't know how to say it. There's people who don't know what they want to say, but have the ability to say whatever it may be. And there's people that have neither of those two things. And they're the ones that are totally blind and helpless because they literally just don't have a voice, and they don't know what their voice would be even. King's really helped me understand what I wanted to, or what I wanted to say in life, and in work, and in just in life with a capital L. Being at the academy has really helped me focus and hone how I say that. So kind of sharpening and defining the way in which I communicate the things I feel called to do in the world. Whereas before, I felt like I was just stuck with this pinball of, I know this is what this is it, but I really don't know how to tell you about it. And being at the academy has really helped me with that, as well as this whole idea of community is just, it's really unmatched. We've had moments where somebody says something and it's like just meant as sort of one of those sarcastic jokes, but it comes off the wrong way, and right there it's like, wait a minute, no, that actually really hurt. And we'll just do what we call life together. So Bonhoeffer's book, Life Together, that is my house. So I was proud of that. That's actually one of the books we read, and that's the way our community is modeled after Dietrich Bonhoeffer's idea of life together. And it's really beautiful too, just because you've got this time and space and resources to focus on what the Lord has for you. And you're surrounded by people who really care about that and really want you to, they want to see you do that to the best possible ability. So I think that's just one of the beautiful things about it.
Have you guys read James K. Smith's Desiring the Kingdom? Is that something you do? Yeah, okay, cool. So spent a lot of time at the Academy talking about head, heart, hand, epistemology, aesthetics, ethics. What I believe influences what I feel passionate about, influences what I do. One of the things I love about Smith's book is he talks about it kind of goes the other way around more often than not. What I do every day and my habits influence what I love, and what I love influences what I think, and it comes out that way. And at the end of his book, he says, wouldn't it be great if universities were more like this, more monastic, more about, ritual and stuff? And I think had he been to the academy, he would have said, that's it. Because that's exactly what it is. It's you're really infusing ritual into your life, and it's a very raw community experience, more so than I had at my, I can't speak for King's, but more so than I had at college. And so it's that.
So thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank Andrea back there, Andrea Lopez. Y'all know her. She did this whole marketing campaign for everything. She's been awesome. She's my event coordinator. I've given all of my student workers titles, which I love. My external communications person is Heather Kate, who also helped out a ton. So she's awesome. And you guys have been awesome too. So thank you so much for coming. Do y'all mind just sticking around a little bit and they can ask you some questions? Okay, so here's the big thing, right? So the person who, now before I say who just won, I'm going to tell you why I really liked what they said. So it's before I tell you their name, and I'm using non-gender specific language, so you still don't know who it is. This person, I think, had a great way of kind of basically saying that here's my most fundamental calling in life is this, and here's how the vocation that I think and my interests are actually aligned with it. I loved so many of them, and you know what I really loved about all of them? I have students who come in to meet with me and they say, I want to be a writer. And I try to disentangle them from certain titles and try to think about what they're interested in. So are you interested in words? Is that why you think you want to be a writer? There's so many things you can do with words. Don't be so quick to narrowly pick a particular title. And so I loved this kind of answer because it had a little bit of both. It was a little specific, but also general enough. So here's what it was. I exist to seek after God and to shed light upon that search. So it's both of those, by editing, writing, and remaining open to mentoring others. So there's also that aspect of serving other people. If that was you, do you know who it is? Yeah. So you win. Thanks to you guys for coming. Y'all are awesome. We're going to do these every so often. I think our next one is going to be probably maybe in this room, maybe not, but I think we're trying to get entrepreneurs with Praxis. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Praxis. It's a faith-based entrepreneurship thing. And then in that'll be probably in end of March, beginning of April. And then we're going to do another one about local government. So one of my friends works for Gail Brewer, who is the Manhattan Borough president, and then another friend used to run the Second Avenue subway under Mayor Bloomberg. So a city planner out in Brooklyn. So ways that you can actually serve the city with local government too. So be looking forward to those. Thanks, you guys.